Could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, the Planning Commission meeting for this today, Wednesday, March 27th, 2019. Let me read the chairman's script since we have a couple items on the agenda this evening that may require public comment. So if you'll bear with me, these are some legalese we need to go through. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Paul Moore, chairperson. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezonings, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I'd like to introduce the members of our commission this evening. To my left, Smeet Shaw, Fred Edwards, Kurt Nolte, myself, Paul Moore, Mark Bittner, and Ron Gilbert. Record will show that Chris Doty is absent this evening. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed in the proposed agenda. I'd like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of the time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed the disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised, and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in these council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstrations of any sort within the chamber are prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outburst. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission, so please show the same respect for the person speaking that you'll expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packets to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton zoning ordinance, you are required to update or obtain new signs for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay, and there are no exceptions. So at this time, I'd like to call for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that would care to make a comment into the record on any topic that is not posted as a part of our agenda this evening?
I don't have any comment cards for general public comment.
Okay, last call. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the action minutes, and we have heard from staff that the minutes are not going to be ready for this one, so I'd like a motion to defer the minutes to our next meeting.
Move to defer them till the next meeting.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes will be heard at the next meeting. So the first item on our agenda this evening is a preliminary plat. Melissa.
Do you want to go
I
ahead
need to
and
read
the
the
script?
statement. Sorry.
Okay.
The Planning Commission is tasked by the City Subdivision Ordinance to conduct a public hearing on proposed preliminary plats that have been found to be complete by the Community Development Department. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission is required to review the proposed preliminary plat and provide comments and make recommendations regarding the plat to the Community Development Director. The Planning Commission does not approve or reject the proposed preliminary plat, but merely provides comments or recommendations based on the public hearing and the Planning Commission's review of the proposed preliminary plat. Okay.
All right, good evening. For those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Melissa Brannon. I'm the Plan Review Manager here at the City of Milton. Tonight I'm going to be presenting the preliminary plat that we have on the agenda. The name of the development is called Cogburn Creek, and it's located off Cogburn Road, as you can see in this map. The owner is Georgia Tennessee Development Partners, LLC, and the site planner is Reese Hoops and Fincher. It's a 14.326 acre tract, and it's currently undeveloped. The proposal is for 11 single-family lots to yield a 0.77 units per acre density in AG1 zoning. So this is the site plan. As you can see, this one entrance off of Cogburn Road, and then we have the rural view shed along the frontage, and then we've got the 11 lots as described. The lots range in 1 acre to 1.3 acres. And then I want to note the location of the detention pond. It's right here. The site is high in the middle, and it slopes to a low point on this side as well as this side down towards the river to the south. So this pond is located here at the low point, so it's right up front. So this plan, it's been through review. It meets all of our codes. Staff does have a few concerns specific to the detention pond. It's up front. This is conceptual level right now. It was really onerous on the applicant to ask him to do full engineering, but we're concerned because of the high point in the middle and the low point to the sides that they're going to have to buck grade if they need to try to get the water from these lots 6, 7, and 8 over to that detention pond. They're saying that they've done enough due diligence and preliminary studies that they're confident in it. We've just warned them if once we come to LDP time and anything changes significantly with the site plan that they would need to come back before the board for recommendations. Another part of this plan to note is the configuration of lot 6 specifically. As you can see, it's a really tight lot, and once again, it meets our codes. They showed that septic will fit here without encroaching down into the stream buffer to the south, but it's a tight lot and it's an unusual configuration that we just feel it doesn't have any issues with codes, that we just feel like it could be a problem for property ownership. So that's really what we have here tonight, and the applicant's not present, but staff is here to answer any questions that we can answer.
Okay, thank you. Because the applicant isn't here, Robin, you had suggested that in our conversation that the applicant has asked for a deferral?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So in the instance of a deferral request, I don't want to deny the community, if anyone is here this evening with an interest in speaking on this, whether they're in favor or against it, for fear that if we do defer this for the full hearing on it, that if you're not able to come to the next meeting, which would be 30 days from now, that you may not be able to attend. So is there anyone here this evening that's intending to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this plat that would like to speak into the public record this evening?
So I have one speaker card
Okay.
that would like to speak. And then the specific date when you do defer, it would be April 24th. So
Okay.
just for your notes.
So
So-
why don't we have public comment
Okay.
before we engage in any conversation?
Okay. The first speaker is Jack Mandula.
Hello, my name is Jack Mandula, reside at, so I'm going to slide this over, 2355 Saddle Springs Drive, Sunnybrook Farms. Sunnybrook Farms is a subdivision that is downstream from, well, it's not on the screen anymore, but there's a creek on the south side of this property that originates at a pond in Crooked Creek Golf Course, flows down many private properties, crosses Cogburn, past this property, and then actually bisects our property in Sunnybrook Farms in approximately half. We have got about a quarter of a mile of frontage on either side of the creek. So I really have three comments that I wanted to share with you tonight. First of all, I don't know if you're familiar with this area of Cogburn, but this is an extremely steep piece of property. It has about a 15% grade on it. And so entry and exit from the single road in the subdivision on and off Cogburn is going to be extremely problematic, especially for accelerating and deaccelerating. And the site plan today shows no turn lanes for accelerating or deaccelerating. So my recommendation is that we need to consider the traffic flow here, especially coming down the hill, that people would come out of the circular where Francis, Cogburn, and Hopewell come together south down Cogburn. The second comment I would make, as I mentioned a little bit already, is because the topography is extremely steep, as a property owner along this creek, we've already had significant silting issues. And we have a bridge that crosses it that we use for our horses to get from one side, from where our barn is, over to another side where there's a pasture. And consistently, we're having to take material out of this creek, not only silt material, but debris. And so my concern is that I know we have a 75-foot impervious setback. Because of the topography being so steep, that is not going to be sufficient to prevent erosion, a significant erosion into this creek during construction or even after construction. Typically in any rainfall, we're getting significant orange and brown dirt in the creek. And in fact, if you look at the lake where our creek ends up in, is in Starnes Lake. That lake was dredged about 20 years ago. There was about 10,000 square yards of material taken out of that lake. That lake is now almost back to that original composition where it needs to be dredged again. And again, it's all because of upstream construction, not only from Crooked Creek when that was put in, but Clear Brook subdivision as well. And so we're concerned that pretty soon the lake is going to be silted in, the creek is going to reroute itself wherever to the low point is, and before you know it, the lake is going to be significantly diminished. Which takes me to my third point. There are the 100-year floodplain lines identified on the site plan. What we're experiencing already is the water levels, when there's significant rainfall, is going above the 100-year floodplain line because the capacity of the lake has been reduced so significantly. So again, it's an issue because we continue to have siltation into this lake. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I do not have any other cards, but are there anybody else who would like to speak that's in the audience on this item? Okay. Appears that nobody else wants to speak.
Okay, so we'll close public comment. So we have a couple of options, I think, Paul, correct? And we can have a discussion on it for the benefit of those in the audience who have an interest on it and want to hear what the Planning Commission's thoughts may be. Or we can hold that discussion for the benefit of the applicant 30 days from now at the deferral. I mean, do you have a recommendation as to what is most fair and equitable to all the parties at this point?
No specific recommendation. I'd leave that to the pleasure of the board. Although if you wanted to allow for as much information to be gathered as possible before commencing your discussions amongst yourselves, then you might want to have the applicant have a chance to add their input.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think probably a brief discussion would be appropriate to at least at least vet some of the things that you may have come prepared to discuss this evening. I think Robin and I were the only ones who may have had that awareness prior to the meeting starting this evening. So I'll entertain any discussion at this point, questions or comments for staff. And I have a couple.
For staff.
Who's yours before, Fred?
No, I was going to say I had questions for the applicant.
Yeah. Well, you might want to. Why don't we hold those until we've maybe had a discussion with staff, and then we read those into the record. So, Melissa, one of the things that you had talked about was the design of the water retention at the front of the proposed development. I think Mr. Is it Medulla? Makes some excellent points. Now, I'm not familiar with the stream going, downstream from there where his property is. I'm familiar with where the property is and the topography. Did staff consider some of the things that he has noted into the record this evening? Are we aware of that downstream lake being an issue? Obviously there would be more runoff if we're putting some more impervious surface in this area.
At this time, we were just looking at the proximity of the development to the stream buffers as far as where the septic was located, and they were showing the septic right on the edge for many of the lots, right on the edge of the 75. So it is very tight, those lots. But as far as a downstream analysis, we could pass that information over to our stormwater engineer and take a closer look at that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be warranted in this case. I think, Mr. Medulla makes some excellent points. If we are at a point where that downstream lake is not able to handle what historically has been dealing with the runoff, and we're going to be compounding that if this plat goes forward with approval, we don't want to be creating unexpected consequences. Will the applicant be required to do or does the city and staff enter into a sightline analysis for the entrance and exit? And there is obviously going to be some issue there with traffic volume on Cogburn Road. I think was it 11 more residences, if I remember correctly?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, when our transportation engineer reviewed this for approval, she'll look at it and she'll evaluate it based on the number of lots and the number of trips that will yield. And it does not warrant a traffic study by the size of the development, nor does it warrant a turn lane. So we can revisit that. We can always take another look at it with LDP, but at this time, her determination was that neither was warranted.
Well, I think, there may be some value to at least for the discussion about it. I have been at this for a long time, and one of the debates that we always have is the value of a turn lane in a high volume environment. I think that is Cogburn right there posted 45.
I'm not sure the speed limit.
It's either, I think it's 45. And although, we know the community doesn't necessarily abide by the speed limits, one of the things that at least comes into discussion always is turn lane versus the slowing of the vehicles themselves to make that turn. It is it could be considered traffic calming in itself when you do have a delay that's created, and you hope people don't speed up to overcome the delay. But I would just ask that maybe we engage the applicant in consideration of, or staff to have a conversation about speed.
Yes, we will do that.
The last comment I want to make has to do with, and again, it would be beneficial if we had the applicant to answer this question. Each of the lots is presented with a pool, drawn into consideration, and I don't know that every single lot will have a pool. But one of the things, this goes back to a decision that the mayor and council made a couple of years ago, and I know that they debated it at length about how much surface area on any given acre could be considered appropriate for coverage. And I think this is an example of one of the things that is an example of the downside of the amount of coverage that we allow on a lot. because of the size of the houses being presented, because of the pool application and other surface areas out there, I think in every single instance where stream or septic fields and secondary fields are allowed to encroach in the undisturbed buffer, oftentimes they don't because there's enough lot to accommodate those things. But in this particular presentation, I think in 11 of 11, we're proposing that if not the primary, the secondary fields are encroaching into the undisturbed buffer. And that's unfortunately, in my mind, a good example of a problem that we talked about, but hadn't decided it was going to be enough of an issue to contemplate a reduction of allowable surface area or coverage area on a lot. This is a good example of the problems that it presents. That's all the questions or comments I had. Fred, did you have?
Well, the comment I had was what staff had said, concern over the retaining
Potential
area. Potentially looking at the site, to me, and again, we didn't have a breakdown as far as the topography as to whether it slants down and how much. I think that becomes a major problem as far as location.
Yeah.
Because driving by that location, that is, as Mr. Medulla said, extremely steep. And I can't picture the homes being on that and also seeing that surface water is going to run the opposite direction.
Yeah. Melissa, can you address that part again for me? One of the comments that you made, I think, was addressing the fact that the lots, the deeper lots on the cul-de-sac end of the development, we're going to have to deal with the water in a different way because it's obviously below the peak of the subdivision. Can you address that again for me?
Yeah, so, maybe I'll pull up the plan so I can kind of talk you through it.
And I guess to ask another question on top of that is, was any consideration given, if it's a low point, to a secondary retention area in that problematic lot that you pointed out? I think it was number 6.
Yes, you've nailed it. That's exactly what staff would have liked to have seen. There weren't any codes requiring it, but I think that the site lends itself more to 2 detention points, one here and then one down at lot 6, where we're saying is kind of an unusually configured lot. The thought is that it's a high point here. And when our city engineer looked at it, he really didn't see how you could pick up these 3 lots, get it up the hill through here. Now, the applicant has done extensive engineering, and he believes that he can do it. Another option could be to treat the stormwater on 6, 7, and 8 on their own lots. So that would be another route they could go. But the main concern is the low points on 6, and really that it lends itself better to detention. And our other concern is the amount of area that they're showing here for the site plan, or for the detention on the site plan. It's conceptual and it's very tight. So if once they flush out their engineering, if they can't do that, because as you know, our codes don't allow walled detention, so it takes more area to create those gradual slopes down into the pond. So when our city engineer looked at it, you see they're right up on the buffer here too. He was skeptical. It would take more studying to prove that this could be done in this tight space without any walls. So that was our concern. But once again, at this conceptual level, it's too onerous on the applicant to ask them to spend a bunch of money to completely engineer this out. So it's their risk that they're taking, is how we've kind of stated it to them.
So just to make sure I heard you correctly, so if the engineering, well, let me say it differently. Sounds like there's 2 courses to engineer this. One is collection of the water primarily affecting lots 6, 7, and 8, and somehow engineering it to get uphill and to the retention pond. Is there going to, had they proposed, would it be a subterranean collection point, or how would that work?
I would have to ask our city engineer. He knows more of the details of that. I know he worked through it with them. It really just sounds like they're going to be burying their pipes or raising their pipes as high as they can and then burying them so that they can, create gravity flow. That's all I know.
Yeah, okay. And then if they are engineered to, if option 2 comes into play, where it's engineered for on-site collection for those 3 lots, I don't recall that we've ever addressed a situation like that where we've had to engineer that. And would that, what would happen to, what consideration would have to be given to buffers and setbacks?
Yeah, the same consideration as the master pond. It would be possibly a shared pond between the 3 lots, or it could be possible that detention is done in the master pond and then they do water quality only on their lots. Like I said, we'd have to kind of wait to see how the engineering flushes out, but there are some options there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I think in closing, Robin, what is, because the applicant has requested the deferral, will staff be in communication with the applicant prior to the next hearing to advise them that we have had some discussion on this?
Yes, when I spoke to the applicant earlier today, I told him that we may defer it to next month, so he's expecting to show back up next month, and I'll just catch him up with what we've discussed tonight when I speak with them.
Okay. Was the reason for their request something extraordinary?
It was a time conflict, scheduling.
This has been on their calendar just like it's been on ours for at least a month, right? We might want to remind them we'd like them to be respectful of the community with the schedules that we do set.
Yes.
And I'd ask them that they please review the meeting this evening on Granicus so they can get the benefit of our discussion.
Sure.
All right. If no other questions or comments, I would entertain a motion for deferral.
I move we defer until the April 28th meeting, the
24th, I think it is, Fred.
24th, I'm sorry. The Cogburn Creek subdivision.
All right. I'll second. All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries.
Okay, I know a few people have walked in. I don't know what they were interested in, but I'm going to sound the item. But if anybody wants to speak on the next item, which is the Bethany Bend by Bajan American Properties, please fill out a yellow card and bring it up to me. With that said, the next item is RZ 18-14, VC 18-09. Bethany Bend by Bajan American Properties to rezone from TR and AG1 to TR to develop 54 residential units at a density of 6.38 units per acre and a 3-part concurrent variance to 1, delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback and replace with a 20-foot landscape buffer or 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer adjacent to all property lines, abutting property zone townhouse residential. And 2, to delete the requirement for 75% per vertical wall plane of brick or natural stone. And 3, to delete requirement for 25% brick, tile, and remaining materials listed. This item was deferred by the Planning Commission at its February 27th meeting to tonight's meeting to allow the applicant to provide additional information. And with that said, I will do a presentation. Okay, I'll just review a little bit the history of what's happened with this item. You all originally heard this item on December 19th of 2018, and you recommended approval conditional of the rezoning and of the Part 1 of the concurrent variance for the buffer, and denial of Parts 2 and 3, which were the architectural materials. Additional project information was discovered after the December 19th meeting, and to allow further evaluation of the revised site plan submitted on January 16th, the City Council at its January 23rd meeting of this year remanded it back to this request to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission reviewed this last month on February 27th and voted to defer this item to tonight's meeting to allow the applicant to address the following issues: guest parking, fencing, width of internal road, officially submit architectural materials, and lastly, provide additional buffering to Spring Valley townhomes. And I'll just quickly go over some of the main points of the application. Again, it's located on Bethany Bend, a total of 8.46 acres, of which 4.94 are TR, residentially zoned currently, with a use permit for a senior living facility at a density of 19.84 acres. The remainder of the property is AG1 with 4 existing single-family residences. The future land use is multifamily residential, which is the area of TR with the high density 19.84 units per acre, and then HDR2, which stands for high density residential 2, which calls out in the comprehensive plan for 5 residential units or more per acre. And this property is located within State Route 9 overlay district. So again, I already read through the requests when we sounded the item, so I won't bore you with a second rendition of it. I will make a note that a question had come up about the request of the concurrent variance in regards to the buffer, that as we walk through the revised site plan, the buffer that they're proposing is now 35 feet instead of 20. But this is what's been legally advertised, and it's fine to create a larger buffer than what was advertised. Only if they went less that you would have to re-advertise. So just wanted to make that point. So as you can see, just to review the location, it's on Bethany Bend. Across the street is Forsyth County with the Deerfield Township development, which is a mixed-use development with commercial that hasn't yet to be developed, with multifamily, single-family units across the street. To the northwest is Spring Valley townhomes at a density of 7.86. Further up is Windcrest, and they're at 6.76, both all zone TR. To the west is Hidden Forest, and that's a combination of single family that's adjacent to the property, as well as townhomes at an overall density of 4.99. So just so that's Deerfield Township. There's Hidden Forest, the single family detached homes, a portion of the townhome community, and then also Milton Montessori, which is just to the south, that they had done in a newly constructed building along with their existing structure that's been there quite a while. Quickly, I alluded to the 2008 rezoning and use permit. During that request, there was not a request for the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback, but it was approved for 98 housing units and 2 stories. The current zoning I walked through is TR residential with that existing 19.9 or so units per acre and for senior living. Just want to talk about that a TR residential district encourages usable open space and recreation areas located primarily in or adjacent to single family, provide a transition between single family and non-residential areas, located near retail shopping and major thoroughfares, encourages home ownership and allows a mix of types of housing of duplex, triplex, quadruplex, and townhouses up to 9 units per acre. And then AG1, which is the northern portion, is individual parcel devoted to single family, agricultural, and closely related uses and a minimum of 1 acre lots. The future land use is, as I said before, multifamily to the north, residential, and then actually it's the opposite. Multifamily, high density is to the north, and then multifamily residential is to the south, the ugly pea green color. So, I want to just walk through. The applicant has provided a revised site plan based on the discussions from the last meeting, and I just want to talk about that for a minute here and walk you through what they have provided to us. So they've provided a 35-foot landscape buffer, undisturbed buffer, previously 20 feet. So originally, last time you saw the site plan, they did have this 35-foot landscape buffer. And at the last meeting, there were some residents from Spring Valley. And since that point, they have met with them, 3 of the residents, and they have increased the landscape buffer to 35 feet. This is where Spring Valley is located. Here is a detention pond for hidden forest. And this might get a little complicated. This site plan shows all a landscape buffer, but once they met with the residents, I'll walk you through what they've asked to do within that 35-foot setback or area. And because of increasing this area for landscape buffer, these 3 units, 23, 24, and 25, are now front-loaded to provide that area that was needed for the buffer. As you can see, they've provided a 4-board horse fence along the perimeter up to the area that becomes the large buffer of 75 feet. They've provided 26 visitor parking spaces in various areas of the development. So we have a couple here up front. We have, I believe there's 5 here. There's a bunch of them at the southern end with the mail kiosk and next to the natural open space. And then there's 4 more here for a total of 26 visitors parking spaces. Another issue that came up was in regards to the width of the road, of the internal road or driveway. It's a road of 24. It was 22 feet. The engineers increased it to 24 feet. He has had discussions with the fire marshal about alternative ways of marking. It still would need to be fire laned on one side, meaning signs, and they're very flexible on the design of them. They don't have to be ugly or whatever. They can go with the architecture of the community, as well as it just has to be painted as really a color. So the applicant has been working with the fire marshal and the fire marshal is comfortable with this scenario for this a little bit wider road. So that issue has been addressed. This is just what you saw last time of the detailed landscape buffer plan. I'm not going to go again. This has been reviewed by our arborist and our landscape architect, actually, who's Melissa as well. And they are in support of this type of planting plan. So obviously you're asking, well, now it's changed to 35 feet. So I think that we can work together with the developer to continue that on in the areas that are needed. So let me go on to talk about what, let me step back. Okay. So since since the last meeting, I'm trying to think, we met in February. But the applicant met with Hidden Forest, and I just want to reiterate this, that they met with Hidden Forest, and you can see these wonderful bright green spots are all the residents who they met with, and that they were able to get their signatures of support for the buffer plan. So I just want to make it clear that these are the 5 residents, 4 or 3 that are along the majority of the development. There's E, which is over toward the west, and then C, which is adjacent to the larger floodplain and 75-foot buffer. So all those people have, and I have the letter that shows their signature in support. And this is the meeting I wanted to talk about. Since our last meeting in February, the applicant has met with the Spring Valley Townhome, 3 people from that subdivision. So he walked the properties adjacent to these 3 homeowners, and according to the applicant, the 3 homeowners have expressed satisfaction with the 35-foot landscape buffer or 35-foot undisturbed buffer proposed. Below is a sketch of the area adjacent to these property owners and proposed plans. So conditions of zoning are also included in the recommended conditions to meet the requirements shown in Exhibit A. So let me walk you through this, what was a result of that meeting. So this, and I apologize, I didn't do such a good job as Steve did with the bright green colors. But so we have Spring Valley here over to the left. And the 3 property owners were here on the corner where my cursor is. There's a red dot. There's one right here at the end of the row, and then one in the middle. And it's kind of difficult because our GIS parcels are skewed incorrectly, so it gets a little confusing, and we're working on getting that updated and more accurate. So let's walk over to the right side of the slide, and it's a little difficult because they're opposite. So if you flip Exhibit A, it would be in tandem with the photo, but then everything would be upside down, and we'd have to read things upside down. So I just decided to stay this way. So I'll just walk you through it. This is where the detention area is. And then this is where the building comes from Spring Valley. And you can see that Steve has indicated in red that in lieu of a landscape buffer, the property owners nearby have asked there to be an undisturbed buffer and to provide a limit of clearing and to reduce the size of lots 23, 24, and 25, not the lots, but the buildings, from 45 to 40 feet to give additional room to allow some more natural area behind those units. And then they also have asked there not to be a fence along this back property line down to approximately here. And then the fence would start up again, and then the proposed landscape buffer that you saw the more detailed plan of would start up again. So this is what has been provided to me from the applicant. I do know that at least one of the homeowners are here, and he's given me a card, so he will be able to speak to it as well if there's any issues. So based on the applicant's revised site plan submitted on March 19th, our department offers the following considerations. The development standards is outlined in the staff report on pages 7 and 8. The project meets the development standards for the TR zoning district. The applicant has submitted the required environmental site analysis, which indicates that there are wetlands, floodplain, a stream, and stream buffers. In addition, there are no steep slopes exceeding 25% or any endangered wildlife species or historical sites. Except for that outhouse, I think we should make that. So anyway, as we go on to discussing the variance request, There are four considerations that require compliance. Not to offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. 2, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. 3, not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And lastly, public safety, health, and welfare are secured and that substantial justice is done. And discussing the first part of the concurrent variance is the request to delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and replace it with the 20-foot landscape buffer or 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer. So as you can see on the site plan, it has been increased from 20 feet to 35 feet, and then also the area to the south has the full 75-foot buffer with no trails going through it. Again, I walked through some of this. The applicants provided the 4-board equestrian fence along the abutting property lines to Hidden Forest and portions of Spring Valley. The revised site plan shows a 35-foot landscape buffer adjacent to single-family homes at Hidden Forest, provided a portion of the 35-foot landscape buffer and 35-foot undisturbed buffer adjacent to Spring Valley and the Hidden Forest detention pond, and to refer to Exhibit A. 54 units at an overall density of 6.38 is consistent with a comprehensive plan updated in 2016 and compatible with the residential properties to the west and northwest. The site is comprised of 6 parcels of various sizes and shapes that create an 8.46 acre parcel that is narrow, odd shaped, and contains approximately 1.4 acres of floodplain on the site. In regards to parts 2 and 3, to the materials of the buildings, this area of State Route 9 overlay was not included in the Deerfield Form-Based Code approved by City Council in 2015. The applicant is seeking to build a less heavy look of the predominantly brick and stone that is required by the overlay district. The applicant's architect has worked closely with the city architect to achieve the most appealing and updated design for the area. The applicant has submitted sample materials, associated coded site plan, and chart of exterior materials for each unit. The city architect supports these submittals. And so this is a little bit updated architecture, a little more detailed from the last time that we showed them. So I'll just go through those. And in conclusion, the Community Development Department recommends approval conditional of RZ 1814, approval conditional of VC 18-09, Part 1, and then in regards to Parts 2 and 3, denial, based on the fact that they had not, in our opinion, met the criteria of those 4 considerations for that last Parts 2 and 3. And I'll just go over the conditions just for your satisfaction and if you have any questions. So if you were to approve this or recommend approval, it would be townhouse attached dwellings and accessory uses and structures with no more than 54 dwelling units at a maximum density of 6.38, based on the total acreage zoned. And also want to talk about the developer is responsible through site engineering to demonstrate that they meet all of these conditions. And then 2A is substantial compliance with the revised site plan received by our department on March 19th, and whereby the exact layout of the project may contain minor deviations approved by the Community Development Director, provided the deviations remain consistent with the purpose and intent of the Council's approval of the petition. Notwithstanding the contents of the site plan, the project must meet or exceed the requirements of the zoning ordinance, all other applicable city ordinances, and these conditions. The site plan may be revised with the approval of the Community Development Director in order to comply with city codes and zoning conditions. Unless otherwise noted herein, compliance with all conditions shall be in place prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. 3, to the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations. And this is where it gets a little complicated, but I try to make it as clear as mud, and I put 2 A's on there apologize. So, provide a 35-foot landscape buffer adjacent to property zone TR as depicted on the revised site plan received on March 19th, and the detailed landscape plan dated January 16th. Adjacent to the single-family homes in Hidden Forest and portions of Spring Valley townhomes, except as required in Condition 3B. Design and plant selection shall be approved by the city arborist. Would be if you so desire to approve Part 1 of the concurrent variance. B is provide a 35-foot undisturbed buffer adjacent to Spring Valley townhomes as depicted in Exhibit A. So I separated the undisturbed buffer just to make it clear, and that we have Exhibit A available to show that. Further in 3C, provide a 4-board equestrian-style fence not to exceed 6 feet in height along the property line abutting single-family residential structures within Hidden Forest subdivision. Provide a 4-board. D is the equestrian fence not to exceed 6 feet in height adjacent to Spring Valley as depicted on Exhibit A based on the fact they've asked not to have the fence for the entire property line. And also, units 23, 24, and 25 shall have a maximum depth of 40 feet as depicted on Exhibit A. And finally, F, well, it's not finally, I think, minimize clearing limits and grading to within 10 feet beyond units 23, 24, and 25 as depicted on Exhibit A or as approved by the Community Development Director. So obviously, if some things come up and there's some topo issues or there's a horrible rock under there and they can't do something, or, it gives us a little latitude, but to try to keep the intent of that, but not to be dogmatic where you'd have to come back for a zoning modification. 4 is just dealing with the dedications and improvements for the street, and sidewalks shall be internal to the development and along entire Bethany Bend frontage and connecting to existing infrastructure on adjacent parcels as required and approved by the City of Milton Department of Public Works. And so this is a site plan, the revision from March 19th. This is the detailed landscape plan dated January 16th. This is Exhibit A, and that concludes staff's presentation. So,
Thanks, Robin. Okay, lots of things to absorb, obviously. I think I'm going to take a minute and thank the applicant. It appears you guys have done a lot of work to address the things that we had suggested warranted further review, and we thank you for that. It sounds like you've continued to engage the community as well as the city staff, and looks like you've continued to make progress with that. So thank you for your due diligence on that. So I think, is there another presentation by the applicant at this point?
He's prepared for if you want to ask me any questions right now, or you want to go ahead and have them present.
Well, unless anybody feels strongly about asking staff any questions right now, we can hold that until we've heard the applicant.
Okay.
Is there any public comment this evening as well, Robin?
I was just trying to find out if any. I know I have. Go ahead. So you want to speak for?
Yeah, I'd like to speak. Thank you.
Is this on this case?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are you in support or opposition?
Opposition.
Okay.
Okay. So we do have public comment too.
Let's see. This was that one. This is Corey. Okay. So they can go, we only have 2 comment cards outside of the applicant. So,
All right. So let's start with the applicant.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to public comment.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Thank you. Good evening. Steve Rowe, AEC 50 Warm Springs Circle, Roswell, Georgia. Here representing Bayesian American Properties on the application. Robin's done a really good job of kind of summarizing what we've done. All I did was kind of create some exhibits that may give you some easier things. So this is the road network that we increased to 24 feet, working with Matt Marietta. The areas in lavender are the off-site street parking or off-street parking spaces for just general use. And then the magenta color is the 18-foot driveways where we can fit 2 additional cars per each unit within those areas. So we were able to really increase the off-street parking and not going to have anybody parking on the main roads themselves. And then obviously the buffers that were increased to 35-foot minimum through these areas, whether they're undisturbed or landscaped, depending on the actual need within that area. The only thing that we do want to have a clarification is I'm going to let Corey Jones come up and talk to this, is one of the conditions dealing with the lot depths on those 3 units. He's had some different correspondence with the neighbor versus what the staff has in the staff report. I want to let him kind of clarify some of those changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Corey Jones, 14430 Wyndham Farms Drive in Milton. Just a clarification regarding Exhibit A. When I met with Hidden Forest, the Spring Valley subdivision, the gentleman is here today and he'll be able to speak for himself. We kind of came to an agreement to do these things if it's feasible. So the signatures that were given were provided here, some additional writing signed by the residents that they wanted us to do these items to change the depth from 45 to 40 if it's feasible, to not change the undisturbed buffer, but kind of leave it as it is and not do a planted buffer if it's feasible. All these things we're agreeing to. Remove the fence, of course, that's feasible. But I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
And this time I can answer any questions you might have about the site plan or any of the other issues that may have come up.
Okay, actually, why don't we hear opposition first,
Absolutely.
And then we'll come back to you guys. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, I'd have another commenter for support, but you want to go ahead and do the...
Oh, let's let support.
Okay. So it's Mr. Garamani.
Good evening, gentlemen. We had a good discussion.
Can you give your name and address?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My name is MC Garamani. I reside at 3532 Springview Court. And we met with Mr. Corey after the last meeting, and they made a lot of efforts. And I think, as you saw, they made quite a bit of improvements. We just had a few concerns, which I think they already discussed about them. We tried to minimize disturbance on the undisturbed buffer as much as possible, as they said, is feasible. And we thought if we can reduce those buildings from 45 feet to 40 feet, as you mentioned, there'd be a little less disturbance. And my biggest concern is if we can eliminate the proposed fence on the western property where there's still a green area, so we can have encroachment by natural animals like deer and stuff. And then we appreciate the 35-foot landscape strip that they're providing. We appreciate that. We just try to kind of mimic the natural phase of it as minimize disturbance. So, and we thought if we can save some existing trees along the property lines, there are some trees if we can save those. And but basically, we appreciate what they've done. I know we don't want them to disturb the undisturbed buffer as much as we didn't want to put anything in there. But I mean, your wishes can't come true all the time. But I think they made a lot of effort, so we appreciate that. But if they can maintain those, reduce those buildings from 45 to 40 feet and minimize the disturbance on undisturbed buffer within the 25 buildings. And basically, we go with that. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have one speaker in opposition. Liz Velez Cardamon. Well, that's
related
what
to
I was
the other.
asking
Oh,
you.
it's related to the thing from last night, which
Well,
I think
we-
you showed as well.
No, we already had general comment, and we don't have it on tonight's, so you missed general comment, but I'm sure they would be open to hearing. So this lady is here to talk about something not on the items, so.
Okay. Why don't we, if her time permits, can we come back to that after we've heard this, and
Okay.
we'll close out this, then come back to, it's a general public comment, correct?
Yeah, she has a general public comment about another item that's not on tonight's agenda.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to that rather than interrupt this discussion.
Okay, after your deliberation or
Yes.
after? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, so no public comment? And
No other public comment we
Okay,
have
so
on this side.
We'll close public comment. So questions for staff or the applicant from the Diaz?
I had a question about the detailed landscape plan, which was still the one from January. I think it still showed the roads as 22 feet wide.
Right, so we will, so we're just using that for the landscaping. The site plan, the revision will be applied to from the March 19th revision of the main site plan. So he was doing that based on the previous one, but really our interest is just of the landscaping and the detailing of the landscaping and the plant material, so, yeah.
Okay. Sameet, anything else?
I guess just for the applicant, I just wanted to know, I know that there's now 26 parking spaces. What was that increase from? What was there before?
There was no.
Yeah, we hadn't shown them. We had areas dedicated to put them in as we went into the deeper development with grading and such, but I had to accelerate that design schedule a little bit to show where they would fit.
Okay.
Okay. Fred?
Yeah. Not at this time.
Yeah. Kurt?
Again, just reiterating what Paul said earlier, I think you guys are doing a great job of getting the community involved. You know, and classic example is Mr. Garmini, who spoke last meeting, and I know you guys were proactive in going out and not only talking to him, but others. So I do believe that's very good, and appreciate that. You know, according to the variances, there's 3 of them, correct? And
Yes.
I think staff had recommended on the first one, the deleting of the 700-foot buffer,
Correct.
to approve that one, and I think that was just for my own edification.
Conditionally.
Yes, and that was based upon staff believed there was a hardship
Correct.
based upon the floodplain increase.
That, as well as the shape and size of the overall development, the shape of the property, and then that it's consistent with, you know, the development type as far as being townhomes and the density. So, yeah. But mainly between the hardship that we believe of having the increased floodplain and then the shape and size, as well as their effort to provide a a fairly good buffer for those adjacent property owners. And then, as I mentioned in the staff report, that those single-family homes were supposed to have, I believe it was 25 feet of buffer, that do not have that. Just as a side, that anyway. So because I think they're showing a concerted effort to provide a buffer that would ameliorate any kind of issues with those single-family and townhomes adjacent to it. So.
Okay. And again, I mean, according to my notes, the density is gone. Right now, it's zoned for senior living, not like 98 units or something like that.
Oh, currently, yeah.
Currently.
Yeah.
And so we've gone from 98 plus the AG1 acres, which would put it over 101 units roughly.
Right. Well, they couldn't go into the AG1. They could only develop that within the TR.
But if you look at the whole thing, the whole unit, the parcel they're talking about now would be the 3 on the AG1 plus the 98 of senior living.
Right. Correct. I guess you're right.
So, you know, and now we're down to 54. So again, I think that's, again, different logistics and different demands on the infrastructure from senior living to houses. But, you know, fact it's down to 54, again, I think that's definitely a move in the right direction. That's really all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Mark?
Not yet.
Okay. Ron?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the question of hardship. Staff answered the question, which was their view of the hardship. I'd like to hear the applicant tell us what his hardship is.
In regards to which portion of which
With
part?
regard to the
Buffer?
to the variance buffer variance.
Okay.
Yeah, we put all this stuff together in 2007 and 2008. We came before this planning commission, and we came before city council, and they approved it as it was in 2008. Nobody mentioned anything about a buffer at that point. I mean, staff never mentioned it. We didn't know about it. Our engineers didn't know about it, but it's approved. So we actually have an approved site plan right now by this commission who recommended approval of it, and the city council to go ahead and do it. So when we came back through this time, we're learning about this for the very first time. So planning commission never told us. City council never told us. Planning commission recommended approval. City council approved. And now, 10 years later, they're telling us, hey, wait a minute, you're supposed to have this. And I'm like, wow, we closed on this thing, we bought this thing, we've been carrying it for 10 years based on what we were told and what we were approved for. So I think it's a great hardship for us now to come back and say, hey, you got to have this, when we're already set to move forward without it. So.
Okay.
Additionally,
That's one. There are others, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Why don't you
additionally,
go through your whole list
in
of hardship?
2013, the FEMA decided to raise its floodplain, which we lost, an entire building. We had 27 units that suddenly just went away because of that, and it wasn't our fault that we couldn't build in 2008. We had a huge economic downturn called a recession that I don't know our country's ever experienced before, and so that was a huge hardship on us, losing that 27 units, and then also not being able to do anything because of this recession. So just those two things in my opinion. So thank you.
I thought it had previously been stated that the lot size and shape was an issue as well. Was that not the case? I thought you had said that.
The lot shape, if you look at it, is very intricate, kind of goes up, down, in and out of that property, which if you extended the buffers, it really leaves you with almost no developable area.
So
in addition, if this was not in the overlay district, there would be no buffer between this property and the neighboring property, since it would be the same zone.
Right, but it is. And
Can I correct that? There actually would still be the buffer, even in the form-based code. So,
okay.
Yeah. So just let me make sure I understand. Is the lot shape? Are you suggesting that the lot shape is a hardship for you?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Ron?
I think I have nothing more to ask them, if that's what.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mark, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I think we've established the hardship for the buffers. I don't believe, there is a hardship for 2 and 3, but I don't think that should let us stop us, because sometimes you put rules or you put designs in place that can come back and bite you. Maybe we have with an overlay as times change and tastes change and designs change, and I think we have to adapt somewhat to what's changing. So there's no hardship for that, but I still think for Milton it's better to look past that and say we're controlling what we're putting there. We could come back if somehow this doesn't get done and they put something else there that isn't going to be as nice. So I think looking at this, controlling what we're going to put there, I think we should look at it that way, not just and look past that hardship, but what's better for the city of Milton. And I think looking past that is better. So.
Okay.
I'd like to just add to what Mark had to say, being on the...
Commissioner Edwards, can you put your thing together?
Sure.
Being on the commission and seeing this property come before us at least twice, maybe 3 times, I think for my observation that we should accept their hardships. I think the design and the work that they have shown deserves that.
Okay. Thanks, Fred.
I'd like to chime in.
Sure. Okay.
I had no further questions for the applicant. Since we started discussing whether this is appropriate or not, I'd sort of like to chime in. With regard to the first hardship that was mentioned, namely he was unaware of the buffer requirement. I think, as the history will show, you purchased a parcel of land, portion of this parcel under discussion, in November of 2008. The Planning Commission in September of 2007 began discussion of the increased buffer. So you purchased this, more than a year after the discussion began in this community. Failure to know that the discussion is ongoing and is not a hardship in my view. It is much as failure to obey a law, failure to knowledge of a law is not an absolution if you violate it. In this case, my personal view is if you were unaware of it, it was a failure in your due diligence. And that's a business risk which you have to shoulder. That is not to be shouldered by the community or the residents that are immediately adjacent to this parcel. Your second point dealt with the floodplain. Sort of falls into the same category. Here we have a sophisticated investor who bought a parcel of land with the intention of developing it and making a profit. The investor knew that there were wetlands on that property when he bought it. A sophisticated investor knows that wetland designations are subject to periodic review. It is a risk that the investor undertook knowingly. Unfortunately for our investor, those were changed. It was discovered by FEMA that the wetlands were larger than had been thought. The decision reduced the amount of land available for exploitation, for development, and which is unfortunate. And the investor sustained a loss, an unrealized loss, but a loss nonetheless because he had property that he can't use. That is unfortunate. But it's a business risk. He knew the wetlands were there. So how is this investor trying to recoup his loss? He is asking for a variance so that he can fit a particular project on a parcel of land. What's the price of the variance? The price of the variance is neighbors who will lose a 35-foot buffer and a 10-foot setback. They will lose 60% roughly of the protections or buffers accorded to them by Milton Ordinance. If the variance is granted, we are forcing Milton residents to pay for our applicant's business risk that he incurred. We are here, in my view, to protect the citizens of Milton. We are not here to assure a builder's profit, especially when that profit is compromised by failures in due diligence. As to the property shape, the parcel being discussed is oddly shaped. I give you that. The developer knows that. He owns part of the parcel and has an option to buy the second part. So he doesn't own the whole thing right now. He is in the process of creating the parcel we are talking about this evening. He knows the parcel is too small for his project because he cannot fit it on the property without requesting a variance regarding those buffers. Yet he is assembling the parcel and, by so doing, creating the issue. He then asks for relief from the issue that he just created. Frankly, that's perverse. The issue is not the lot. The issue is the size of the project. The first time this was heard in these chambers, back in December, one of the members of council said, "You're putting a 10-pound project on a 5-pound lot." And that is indeed the case. In my view, the requested variance is a sham. It is a perversion of our process, and it offends the zoning ordinance and is unjust, terribly unjust, to the citizens of Milton, especially those that are adjacent to this parcel that we're discussing this evening. Those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions before I pose mine? Or comments? Mine are just a couple detail questions for the applicant and Robin, can we go back to the presentation that they had where Mr. Rowe depicted the changes in the parking? There was lavender and purple coloring. Thank you.
Is that the sheet you want?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to make sure, I think, Mr. Rowe, you said to us that the purple color depicts 18-foot length driveways. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I understand that correctly? So what were those before?
Some of those were there, just weren't just harder to see, so I went ahead and did this. But there were some that were right at 16 or 15 and a half, so I went ahead and expanded those, adjusted some building shifts, and adjusted to get as many as I could get up to the 18-foot mark, so we could fit 2 cars in each of those driveways.
Okay, and so the 18-foot is referring to the length, and that will accommodate. So that's accommodating the length requirement to have a car parked there.
Correct.
And the width will also withstand 2 cars parked side by side.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then for the parking for units 51 through 54 and 48 through 50, those do not have any parking skirts at all. It would be in garage parking only?
Yes, in garage parking, but then they're in close proximity to other off-street parking spaces.
Right, yeah, and I'll come back to that. So, right. But those in particular, 48 through 54, looks like those, looks like also 45 through 54 actually all fall under that category.
Yes,
they would have in garage parking
and
only.
then there's some up in this area as well.
I'm sorry, say it again. Oh, yes, okay. So units 18 through 22.
So then that's more than 9 units. Isn't that the way you count them up?
Yeah, I didn't say that was only 9.
So that's 15 units that don't have parking length, or actually parking of any kind,
right,
except for in-garage
parking.
Right. And they're in close proximity to other, well, in some instances, they're in close proximity to other
Correct.
Community parking, but not dedicated parking for them.
No. Which is it's not unusual for other developments to do that as well.
No, I understand that, but it sort of lends itself to one of the points that Mr. Gilbert was making in terms of the density of the project and some of the things that are of issue. And I you guys did a great job of providing some additional parking. You guys have gone back and basically answered all of the questions that we posed to you.
Yeah, we really tried.
And I applaud that. It doesn't leave it without issue, though. I mean, there were still some questions that we've got that need to be addressed. Thank you for those answers. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is the commitment to Mr. Garamani, I think is Garamani, about the reduction of the depth of the homes. I think it's units 23, 24, and 25.
Right. And
going from 45 to 40 feet.
And I wasn't part of that discussion, so I'm going to defer that to Corey and let him answer that.
All right. Well, let me ask the second part of my question. Is do you have units that are 40 foot in your portfolio today, or are you going to have to design something new?
That would be a special design. And just looking at the site plan, I think there's some things I can do to just reorient it to get the 45 feet to kind of fit in there. It would make it an odd angle to the units, but I think I could fit it in there at the 45 and still not encroach into that undisturbed area.
And not lose your 18-foot length driveway?
Right. Again, I don't know that for sure, but just looking at it, I believe that if I just turned it to the northwest a little bit, I could get those units to be equal length, and then it just wouldn't be squared up with the road, which would be a little odd. But there's some things architecturally we could do to make that look right.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and Mr. Jones, if you wouldn't mind addressing the tentative agreement. I know that you were particular to qualify some of the language.
And he, the gentleman also reiterated what I said when I was up here. So the idea is these are the things that they want us to do if it's feasible. So my promise is to do that.
Okay. But at this point in time, you don't necessarily have a 40-foot designed solution in your portfolio?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that's all the questions I
had one which I'd missed earlier. What type of material you described the alley? Is that the same material that's in the roads, or is there a difference in that?
Because of the paved surface?
Yeah.
It will be hard paving. It may be concrete. It may be pavers. It just depends on whether we have enough water quality room in the pond itself. If not, I'll need to do water quality in the alley areas with some pervious pavers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I think we have an interesting decision before us this evening because of the variety of circumstances to consider. We have an applicant before us that has gone to great lengths to engage the community. They've engaged the surrounding property owners that are primarily affected by the reduction of the buffers. They've addressed our concerns to a great extent, although not completely, but to a great extent to parking. Actually, before I make any further comments, I realize I have another question. And I think, Mr. Rowley, this goes to you. And there was further discussion, I think, with our fire chief about the road widths. And thank you for looking. It looks like you've tried to accommodate that as well.
Yes, sir.
Last time we were together, one of the comments that you had made was in the discussions you were having with him, there was some concern on his part about the length of the backing up of a fire truck. And I know that it's like 150 feet maximum.
Correct.
That a fire truck can be required to back up before you have to make other considerations for that. Can you tell me about any further discussion that took place on that topic?
Actually, we had already had that solved in the last meeting, but I can go ahead and actually it was in this area where we had a dead-end road with a turnaround here, but he had asked us to go ahead and connect that through alley to make that fully accessible in all directions. That was really not that big of an imposition, so I went ahead and made that work for Mr. Marietta on that.
So the solution to that is the width of the road as well as the additional connectivity?
The connectivity of the alley, correct.
Okay.
And the alley would have a 20-foot roll area. The width of the alley may only look 15, but we may have grass pavers or some other mechanism so that the 20-foot is in all areas.
Okay. And will that be designed into the plan so that the...
Yeah, that's part of the detailed design.
So
of the
fire
land
chief
disturbance
will be,
permit.
he'll be comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think in a passing comment you made to us last time was at one point, I think he was asking you to entertain, or you were entertaining sprinkling some of the buildings because of the fire code issues?
We hadn't gotten to that level of detail. I'm not an architect by training, so I would let the architect answer that and kind of engage with Matt. But that is an option we have on the table if there are issues that we can't get around on the site.
So that would only be entertained at the point where you have not been able to resolve a fire truck access issue, correct? So there is, at this point, no intent to design sprinkling into the buildings because you feel like you've met the fire requirements?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I had. Thank you for the clarification. So where I was going with my comments a minute ago, before I realized I hadn't finished asking some other questions, was, we've got an interesting decision before us this evening. This is a more complicated one than we've addressed in quite a while. We have a land use plan that allows for some of this stuff and doesn't allow for others. We've got setbacks that some are allowed, and we have code that says other parts are not. We've got a product that the applicant is putting forward that I think has value to the community. We've talked about that at length in some of the other discussions we've had prior to this evening. And I think it's a problematic lot that warrants consideration of a project like this. For it providing a solution that has some viability. It wouldn't go idle. It would likely be developed. But we're also being asked to consider some variances that, whether you're assessing staff's conclusions or the conclusion of the applicant or the conclusions of one of our commission members, we have some difference of opinion as to whether or not the hurdles have been met on the thresholds of meeting the necessary requirements to be granted a variance. So I ask that you give careful consideration to all of those things tonight when you cast your vote, because it's the complicated consideration for things that the community counts on us being the watchdog for, to ensure that we put the best product forward for the community for today, tomorrow, and forevermore. So I ask that when we make that motion this evening that you take those things into consideration. So I will entertain a motion.
I would like to move that RZ 18-14 and VC 18-09 be denied.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. If there is no second, the motion fails. I will entertain a second motion. Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact.
I can bring mine up again.
Anybody prepared to make a motion? All right, let me take a second before let me withdraw my readiness for that motion. Staff, Robin, at one point there was some language that you were crafting for us to consider should there be a motion in favor of the
For the
variances
materials, yeah.
this evening. So can you bring that into consideration?
Yeah. Yeah, I just had pulled it up. I did not make a physical copy of it, but I do have it in front of me. So if you so choose to approve parts 2 and 3 in regards to the architectural materials, it should be under condition 3 to the owner's agreement to the following site development considerations. Number G, because that's the next letter, under 3, to delete the requirement for 75% per vertical wall plane of brick or natural stone and replace with the materials listed in the chart of exterior materials submitted by the applicant or as approved by the City of Milton Design Review Board, Part 2. And H, 3H, would be to delete the requirement for 25% brick, tile, and remaining materials listed for accent materials and replace with the materials listed in the chart of exterior materials submitted by the applicant or as approved by the City of Milton Design Review Board. And then I, it would be 3I, architecture shall be consistent and designed with the drawings submitted by the applicant, and I just made this up, identified as exhibits B, C, and D, which were those 3 graphics that was in the presentation, or as approved by the City of Milton Design Review Board. And in the note I gave to you all, I have been obviously speaking to our city architect, and this was the type of, if this would to be approved, he believed this type of condition would be good because we don't want to be stuck in, okay, the site plan has to have every building with every notch, with everything to be exactly that. And I think the site plan in general allows for some wiggle room. But then at the same time, we don't want the architecture to be totally different. So that's why we're referring to that sheet with that chart. And if you look at the chart, it actually is very specific. So it's pretty specific, and that's why I say or is approved to allow some wiggle room, let's say, in case a certain material is no longer available or the color's not exactly right, but it's similar. So ultimately, no matter what, each of these buildings will have to be reviewed and approved by the Design Review Board and with much examination by the city architect as well. So.
Okay. Thanks, Robin. You just brought something else to mind that I have a question for the applicant. The actual construction plan of this development, will it be a phased construction or will it be a start to finish all happening at the same time because you already have concluded what the product is going to be and each homestead has already been designated?
I'll take a crack at answering that.
Okay.
From a site development standpoint, the entire site would be developed as one.
Okay.
With regards to vertical construction, depending on which products are selling better, which ones are not, it would probably be phased. How quick and how many of each, I don't know that answer quite yet.
So if I look at the proposed site plan, it shows a variety of homestead sizes, and I don't remember the numbers, but at one point in the presentations to us, you suggested there was a price range
Right.
of the individual products.
Yes, sir.
And I don't recall what the price range was, but so if let's just pick some numbers for the sake of the example. There's a $400,000 option, a $500,000 option, and a $600,000 option. Those may or may not be real. And the $400,000 option is selling, and those are right now depicted on the back of the development. And the $600,000 option is a slower selling item, and those are all depicted on the front.
Right.
If there's more demand for the $400,000 option than the $600,000 option, is it possible that you would then consider developing more of the $400,000 options and this site plan to a great extent would be
It
modified?
is possible. It is possible. We have to be flexible to the market. And that would be part of that flexibility is having different product types, different things, even within a building row itself. So optimally, I'd like to start at one end, probably the northernmost end, and work my way out of the development. But again, that's all a function of the marketplace and the buyers. Nothing would make me happier than to just keep vertical construction going until they're done.
Yeah, and obviously efficiencies of continuity of construction.
Absolutely.
Do you, at this point, based on market demand that you've assessed, do you have a construction window where you would forecast from launch to completion that would sell out and be built in what, X period of time?
Not scientifically right now.
Right. Do you have a ballpark?
I mean, if you sold 3 to 5 units a month, that'd be...
It depends what our units per month and the absorption is. I mean, if we can sell 3 to 5 units a month, we can be out of there in a year.
Yeah. Okay. The reason I'm asking those questions are, it has to do with, you've obviously already seen us struggle with a motion this evening. So the motion is likely still going to be a complicated one. And as we're considering what staff has suggested to us for consideration, that has to do, the language that Robin just read into the record for us primarily has to do with the look and feel of it, not necessarily what the product is in terms of size and occupancy and driveway lengths and all those kinds of things that we're being asked to consider. So all the things that I was hoping were maybe a little bit more absolute, maybe just became more of a variable than I had hoped there would be. But one of the things that Robin is suggesting that we need to create flexibility for has to do with the finished product external appearance.
Right.
So you have to blend. We're being asked to blend those things in our motion. We're being asked to consider, setbacks for what could be a changing product. We're being asked to consider parking considerations and street widths and all those things for what could be a changing product. And we're being asked to consider we're being asked to provide language to consider exterior finishes that may also be a moving target if, in the course of that build-out window, some of the availability of those materials may be depleted. So I'm not asking for a response, but I'm just saying that's why this is a complicated motion. That's why we're struggling, I think.
I think the one advantage that you have over a lot of other jurisdictions, you have your design review board that will kind of keep everyone to a higher standard than if we were just left on.
Yeah, and I think if there is ultimately a motion for approval, and it is, I would propose that motion for approval also consider language that would require you to be in not constant, but regular discussions with not just the design review board, but the Milton City architect.
Right.
So that we can understand what we're doing to the project.
Hi, I'm Carrie Krause, the architect on the project, and I live at 3464 Roxborough Road. The materials that have been selected that have been specified at great detail to you are all throughout the community. So the price points of the units themselves differ in size and interior selections, not in exterior. So the smallest, most narrow units, which looks like it's going to be 23, 24, 25 in the very far back, they'll have the same materials as the larger, more carriage size homes in the front at the street. So don't fear that component.
So just can I clarify? So the materials option is not going to be dependent upon price point.
No, not on the exterior, just the interiors.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Did you have another comment? I interrupted you.
Well, no, and the unit size as well. So that's what will determine the price points of the units themselves.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with some of that clarification, so let me say it differently. So we just had the benefit of some more discussion from the applicant and staff to provide us more things to consider. So still available to us is another motion, we have to entertain another motion. That motion can include a motion for approval with conditions addressed by staff with consideration for the information just shared by staff and the applicant, or there could be another motion based on what you just heard for denial, and with the information that you may have just gleaned from that conversation, you may have changed your opinion about a motion for denial. So both options are still available for consideration. So I will open the floor for a motion.
I'll try. I'd like to make a motion to approve RZ 18-14 with staff's recommendations. So do we vote on that first, or we put it all together and vote as one?
Yeah, you can put it all in one motion. That's
Okay.
fine, yeah.
And make a motion to approve VC 18-09 Part 1 with staff's recommendations. Make a motion to approve VC 18-09 Part 2 and 3 with the verbiage that Robin had read into to us a couple minutes ago regarding 2 and 3 with however she wrote that, and then also with continued guidance through the process from the design and review board and the city architect.
Okay, so it was staff's recommendation for approval for Part 1 and 2 and denial for Part 3. Your motion is for support of all three with the benefit of staff's language and additional consideration, ongoing consideration by the city architect?
Yes.
Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, so raise your
Looks
hand
like
if
we
you're
have
for it.
4 yea, 2 nay.
Okay.
So motion carries.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you very much for your.
and then we can have our speaker.
So I'd like to, I guess we have to reopen public comment
Okay, let me switch the camera
to do that. All right, thank you for your patience. We would
Okay.
like to invite you to the podium to make your comment. It has to do with something that's not on our agenda this evening.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. First, my name is Luz Velez Cardamone. The property I own is at 14540 Wood Road. I apologize to the committee. The calendar online said the meeting was at 7. Otherwise, I would have been here earlier. I wanted to bring to your attention some concerns that residents of Wood Road have and the relevance to, I believe, your committee based on what I imagine you talk about, planning for the well-being of the city of Milton. I'm also here accompanied by another resident of Milton, Mrs. Diane Wilson. So I want to acknowledge that she's here. Wood Road is a road that the homes are probably $1.5 million to in excess of $3 million, depending on the size. It's a gravel road that goes from Birmingham Highway or Birmingham, whatever, to Freemanville. There are multiple concerns that I want to address so that maybe you guys can take action at some point in time, coordinating with your other committees at the city level. So one of the concerns is that presently that road is a gravel road. One of the beauties of Milton is the serenity, the equestrian-friendly community, getting out away from the city, right? So that's one of the reasons that I purchased a property on that road, to be able to horseback ride and have a different lifestyle versus in a master plan community. That road is frequented by many people that walk, jog, ride their horses, etc. But one of the challenges that we have is that presently one of the other committees is working with that road being surveyed, and potentially 50 feet a survey was completed where they were surveying 50 feet into our properties with the consideration of putting in a sidewalk, whether it be made of gravel or be made of mulch or be made of whatever the city felt appropriate. And that sidewalk could be anywhere between 5 to 10 feet wide. It's highly unlikely that any citizen that wants to go walk on a gravel road is going to move their body over into a sidewalk. The problem that we have as taxpayers, as property owners, of people that have made a significant investment in our properties on that road, is that potentially we would be directly impacted with, 10 feet to 50 feet of our property being taken away. I firmly believe that if you want to exercise, there are parks in the city of Milton, like any other city. If you are so in need of exercise and you don't want to go to a park, well, then buy a house in a master plan community that offers you the Ritz-Carlton built-in park within your gates, and you can pay that maintenance fee. Because as citizens and as taxpayers, we made a hefty investment and we're paying the subsequent higher taxes based on our land value, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important that the commission be aware of some of the concern. The second point I'd like to make is that the Fulton County School Board owns 118 acres. That land happens to be directly across Mrs. Diane Wilson's property, as well as my property. People go into that area currently to walk, jog, ride their horses, or whatever. Currently, there is a motion where potentially a cement structure, foundation on Freemanville side would be used to create a potential parking area for horse trailers or for people so that they could park their cars and then walk through that 118 acres, of course, with the blessing of Fulton County. The problem that we have on Wood Road is that that would add additional pedestrian traffic, if you will, to Wood Road. Just this evening alone, when I left my house at 6:35 to come to this activity, I had to stop 7 times because people were walking their dogs on horses or other. It wasn't because of cars. I had to stop 7 times. So if you then allow, in the greater scheme of things, for this trail or this parking space to be developed on Freemanville for the greater benefit of the Milton Trail system, it is going to add more people onto Wood Road, which directly affects the residents, the serenity, the use, going home. We can't even use the road that we live on. We're not saying, and I know that multiple people on Wood Road feel this way, and we enjoy seeing people walk. We enjoy, seeing people use their horses on Wood Road, et cetera. But it's a different thing to have the current traffic that we have, pedestrian traffic, versus what would potentially become. In the past month, my property was violated, and 2 of my neighbors' properties were violated by people that had come onto that road and gone into that 118 acres. My property sign was ripped down that I had just paid like $1,500 for. My mailbox was destroyed, and the other 2 neighbors that border that land, their mailboxes were destroyed. So that's just a small example. In addition, we are now being subjected to the Primo School requesting a use variance at the corner of Freemanville and Phillips. That directly impacts.
Freemanville and Red, I think.
Right, Freemanville and Red. That's also, but it's the end of Phillips, right? So
Circle.
Wood Road converts to Phillips, hits Freemanville, right? Okay. So last night there was a meeting, and there were about 60 people here. This is my interpretation. I would say at least 50 of the people were against that use variance for multiple reasons. I'll just speak from a Wood Road resident perspective. We're going to be our road is going to be further destroyed by the people that are coming from Crabapple and are going to use Wood Road as the shortcut. On top of that, we already bear the burden of the school buses, which today I called the supervisor of transportation for Fulton County, specifically that deals with Birmingham Falls. There were 6 school buses that went on Wood Road between 3:30 to 5:30 at higher velocity than what school buses should be driving at, which further is a further detriment to our gravel, to the speed bumps, and to the safety of people on horse, walking, or whatever. So I'm not quite sure why those school buses are, it appears to me, using kind of Wood Road as their shortcut. Granted, if there's a child, a youth of some kind that lives that needs to get on their school bus, well, of course, that school bus should go pick up that kid. But it's a different thing if they're using it as a shortcut. So, you know, I just wanted to mention, too, this week I went to the zoning meeting that was yesterday. I went to the Green Space Committee on Monday. I would say 5 of the people that sit on the committee were completely unaware that any survey was being conducted because they all responded in a surprised manner. I'm going to go to the Equestrian Committee meeting because obviously equestrian people go to Wood Road. So I would just ask from a planning perspective if you would be so gracious for the benefit of citizens of Milton to ensure that all of your committees are in coordination. I respect that there's a staff person, but it's the committee members that are making the decisions or recommendations and bringing it to, I'm not sure if it's to your committee or to the council. Specifically regarding Primo, that school requesting the use variance, that is going to the Planning Commission on April 24th. I don't know how many people are going to be here or not, but I would tell you it's a very serious concern that residents have, not just the adjacent Redstone, I believe is the master plan community, and the decrease in property values. And that's real. I own a brokerage with over 300 agents. We close over $500 million a year consistently for 13 years. I'm principal owner of that brokerage. It's real. It's not a made-up thing. And specifically the Primo School, which I know this is not about the Primo School tonight, keeps talking about 12 cars. They're an LLC. They're a for-profit business. Fantastic. It's great if you're entrepreneurial. God bless you. But again, it's the citizens of Milton that are bearing the hardship for somebody to make money. That's absurd. That's not what the city's supposed to do. If you want to go make money, no problem. Go find yourself some commercial space and go build yourself your school. And certainly it's a different thing if it's a public school, right? Because if the city of Milton or the Fulton County says, hey, there's got to be a school on this corner, well, you know, that's the county. But this is an LLC using a residential community, and it will directly affect Wood Road, because I'm concerned about Wood Road. But also, just when you leave Phillips Circle and you're trying to get to Red or go left on Freemanville, that's already accident heaven. I don't know how many accidents the police report, but just to make a left-hand turn on Freemanville, you're endangering your life. So are they going to put a traffic light there and then a traffic light at Red, which is like less than, 100 feet up? It's rather illogical. So I appreciate your kindness in allowing me to speak tonight. I've never come before this board, but I would tell you that the citizens of Milton and specifically Wood Road are seriously concerned because our right of enjoyment, our taxpayer dollars, our property values, and simply our security is being compromised. I was told, why didn't you have cameras on your trees so that you could catch the people that destroyed your property sign and your mailbox? So I guess now I got to run electricity out to my trees because, now there's going to be even more people on Wood Road. Diane, is there anything I haven't said?
No, thank you. I think that's
Okay, so thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Just a quick couple of comments. Thank you for taking the opportunity to address this evening. This is exactly what our board exists to serve, and that is an opportunity for Milton citizens to express their concerns, both for the items on the agenda and items that in this particular case are not on the agenda. That's why there's public comment at the beginning of both mayor and council meetings, as well as the planning commission meeting. I can't speak to some of the other boards, but I'm pretty sure they do too. It's encouraging to hear your level of interest in this. There are two. I heard two different things from you this evening: a concern over the Wood Road use and what the city is doing with regard to the Board of Education property. And I also heard a second discussion about, or a second comment about the Primo school. So let me take a moment and just address both of those. The Wood Road situation is a complicated one. And so I encourage you, as you have this evening, to participate in any and all of the meetings that are going to be available to you and other members of the community to express your concerns as you have this evening. Because there are a lot of things that are in motion right now. I think that there are a lot of moving parts, some of which everybody was aware of, some of which are not. Each of us represents a council member and the mayor this evening, and it's quite likely, even though we won't call on anybody else to comment this evening, or I won't unless they so choose, but each of us has likely been engaged by our council member and the mayor, as I have, about some of those concerns. But I will tell you that without going into a great level of detail, there is a lot of additional consideration being given to each of the concerns that you expressed this evening. I know that there was an item, for example, on the Board of Education agenda for earlier, if not this week, it was the end of last week, that was withdrawn because there wasn't enough information available to the Fulton County Board of Education for them to give proper consideration to the request that was being made. And I think there was some confusion as to what the actual request was. So that's actually a good thing, I think, that happened, because it gave everybody a reason to pause and better understand what it is that we're asking for or not asking for, and what implications it may have on the way our parks and trail systems are going to be administered. We do have a good team of people working, our staff members in particular, that are charged with choreographing all of the information sharing that takes place between each of our independent committees. It's impossible for each of us to attend all the other meetings and also do our other daily commitments to our families and our own lives. But the staff does a great job of trying to keep us up to speed on some of those considerations that are being given. The Planning Commission ultimately is responsible for the big picture stuff. For example, it's not very long from now that we'll be working on a review of our master plan, and in that is a consideration of park and rec and trail plans and roadways and land use, et cetera. So it's always good to bring your concerns to us, because those are the things we'll be measuring as we move forward with the next round of review for the comprehensive land use plan and the master plan for the city. So all that being said, the only, I guess, consolation, or the only grounding I can give you in response to your concerns this evening is that I'm aware that there's been some pause given to some of the actions that seem to have some momentum, and additional considerations been given to each of those. I can't begin to tell you what the outcome of that is going to be, but I will encourage you to continue your participation in all the meetings that you've suggested, and others that may come up and be available to you as a result of this new energy that's been given to the things that are being considered. With regard to the school that's coming before us, that'll be heard next month. It would be inappropriate for us to comment on that this evening, but I encourage you to participate in that and express your concerns along with the other members of the community. And we'll give that a full hearing as well next month in our Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
May she say a word? She wanted to say something.
That's okay. You have kind of Diane Napier.
Sure. You can come to the microphone.
I was just going to say.
We'll just ask that you fill out a card after you've spoken.
Okay, thank you so much. Have lived on Wood Road, owned property there for 20 years, and have seen dramatic changes. We have a lot of new people on the road as well. And I really so respect what you say about looking at the benefit and what's best for the people. And I do realize that people enjoy our road. We want them to. They may not always be as courteous as we'd like for them to be, but that's part of it too. But I was going to ask you, please, as you look at any of these scenarios, and like tonight as well, take into consideration the people who live there. Put them first. Put your Milton residents first, and the Milton residents who make the investments. And as Luz said, we made initially sizable investments, and we continue doing so every year. And not just taking care of our properties, but through our taxes as well. So I would just ask each of you, please, as you're making these considerations, think, what if I lived there? What would I want? We have a lot of other properties, a lot of open parks and land that we own now. You've done a great job in securing areas. The country club, let's use them. There's parking at Birmingham Falls Road at the school. And I mentioned additional parking at the country club, and somebody just had an absolute conniption about, oh, we can't do that. Why not? We own so much land there. The sooner we can get that park open, I think it will take a lot of stress off all these other things that we're discussing. And I thank you so much for your time and the work you do. Appreciate it.
Very welcome. Thank you. And those are important considerations. And the other additional items that you just brought to mind are actually in conversation as well. The one point in particular is I don't know for whatever reason the additional parking available at Birmingham Falls Elementary, I think more so for the weekends than during the school day, obviously, for whatever reason had not been contemplated. And I think that is now on the table for consideration, and there will be conversations, if not already taking place, that will take place with the Board of Education about that. So you're on the money with the things that you're asking us to consider. And just encourage you to carry that same message and those same voices in the other meetings that will be available to you. I will give you a resounding endorsement of our city staff. You are served very well by these caring people, many of whom live right here in our community, and even those that don't have been invested in our growth and development of Milton from the very beginning. Most of the people here are long tenured staff members, and they do serve us well. And then I also would remind you that each of you we're also very well served by our mayor and council. Each of you has a representative for the area that you live in. If you've got individual concerns, don't hesitate to call your council member and or the mayor to express your concerns as well. And then you're also represented by members of the community, just like us, who are volunteers from each section of the area of Milton, so that we can do our very best to represent the voices of the areas that we live in, as well as cast votes and make recommendations that will serve all of Milton to our very best. But thank you for joining us this evening, and encourage you to continue your engagement.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.